If I had to describe myself in a single word, it would be inconvenient. Not because I lack charm from it, but because I, Jasper, the Jester, am the sole bearer of truth in a kingdom that prides itself on delightful deceit. Imagine, if you will, a land where honesty is as rare as a sober bard at a tavern, and I am the unwelcome spark in a powder keg of polished falsehoods. The grand throne room of King Reginald the Radiant is a spectacle of contradictions. Velvet banners flutter alongside whispered lies, and the air hums with the buzz of sycophants eager to please a monarch fond of proclamations as capricious as the weather. Today, the king had decreed that all citizens must wear hats shaped like their favorite animal on Tuesdays, a law that baffled even the royal tailors. I stood center stage, cap bells jingling merrily, ready to perform the usual dance of flattery and folly. But the truth, like an ill-mannered guest, insisted on barging in uninvited. "Your Majesty," I began, bowing with exaggerated grace, "perhaps a law mandating hats shaped like animals will bring us closer to nature, or at least closer to resembling a circus." A gasp rippled through the hall. Courtiers clutched their pearls and muttered behind fans. The king's face flushed a shade deeper than his robes. "Jasper," he said with a tight smile, "your wit is as sharp as ever, but less biting might serve us better." "Ah, but sire," I replied, "a court without honesty is like a stew without seasoning, bland and forgettable." The laughter was nervous, the kind that precedes a storm. It was then Lady Mirabelle, the soothsayer draped in scarves and mystery, stepped forward. Her voice, soft and wavering, cut through the tension. "A prophecy," she intoned, "has surfaced in the whispering woods. A war fueled not by steel or fire, but by illusions and enchanted lies." Eyes darted toward me, as if I were the living embodiment of that war truth itself, threatening to unravel the kingdom's carefully spun tapestry. Later, under the dim glow of twilight, I found myself wandering the labyrinthine corridors of the castle. The stones beneath my feet whispered secrets, and the shadows seemed eager to share their tales. It was here, between the echoes of footsteps and hushed conspiracies, that I overheard talk of a plot, one that would soon thrust me from the safety of my fool's cap to the precarious throne of the kingdom. The realization was as chilling as the night air that brushed my cheek. To be the only truth-teller was a curse, but perhaps also a weapon. The question was, could a fool wield it wisely? As dawn painted the courtyard in hues of gold and rose, I stood alone, contemplating the chaos my candor had stirred. The kingdom, for all its pomp and pageantry, teetered on the brink of a war unlike any other. And in the midst of it all, a jester with nothing but truth and a crooked smile to offer. I adjusted my cap, letting the bells jingle softly. After all, every fool has his day, and mine was just beginning. I never imagined that a day could begin with a joke and end with a crown. But then again, in this kingdom of enchanted truths and fanciful lies, the unexpected is the only expectation. It all started in the echoing emptiness of the throne room, where the king had vanished as mysteriously as a magician's rabbit, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the golden tapestries that draped the walls. There I was, Jasper, the fool with the brightly colored cap and bells that jingled whenever I moved, standing before a sea of faces that didn't quite know whether to laugh or tremble. The crown, a heavy circlet wrought from gold and studded with gems that glittered like trapped stars, was placed upon my head with the awkwardness of a bad punchline. It slipped once, nearly tumbling into my lap, and I had to catch it with a hand that was still trembling, not from fear, but from the absurdity of it all. "Long live King Jasper!" someone shouted, though whether in jest or genuine hope, I could not tell. The courtiers exchanged uneasy glances. The advisors whispered behind their fans and beards. Lord Grimble, the Grand Vizier, with a beard long enough to sweep the floor, looked as though he'd swallowed a particularly sour lemon. "A jester as king," he muttered, eyes narrowed. "This will be the ruin of us all." But the throne was empty, and the kingdom needed a leader. The old king's disappearance wasn't just inconvenient, was a ticking time bomb beneath the fragile peace we clung to. So, there I was, a fool crowned by accident and necessity, trying to make sense of a script I had never rehearsed. My first audience was a comedy of errors. I stood before the council, attempting to deliver a speech, but instead, my words stumbled out like a drunken minstrel's tune. "My lords and ladies," I began, clearing my throat, "I am neither wise nor noble. I am, in fact, a fool. But perhaps, if folly is all I have, then folly shall be my guide." The room fell silent, then erupted into murmurs. Lady Merthyr, the royal chamberlain, gave me a sly smile, the only sign of encouragement in the sea of disapproval. I suspected she knew more about the game of power than she let on. Leadership, I quickly discovered, was less about grand speeches and more about understanding the tangled web of court politics. The nobles whispered behind closed doors, their smiles tight and their daggers sharper. My honesty was a blade that cut too deep, unraveling the comfortable lies that held their fragile alliances together. Realizing that I couldn't face the looming threat alone, I turned to the kingdom's most unlikely resource, its outcasts, misfits, and fools. The army I envisioned was not of polished knights or fearsome warriors, but a ragtag band of oddballs, each with quirks that made them seem ill-suited for battle, but perhaps perfect for the fight ahead. There was Sir Bumble, a knight whose armor looked as though it had been through one too many brawls, and whose coordination was more slapstick than skill. There was Whisper the Silent, a scout who never spoke a word but conveyed everything through gestures and sharp eyes. Gathering them was a riotous affair, filled with mistaken identities, misplaced weapons, and laughter that echoed louder than the clang of swords. In the quiet moments, away from the clamor of court and camp, I found myself alone in my chambers. The cracked mirror reflected a man who wore a crown too heavy for a fool's cap, his eyes searching for the strength to lead when every instinct screamed to run. Doubt was a constant companion, but so was a strange, stubborn hope. For all the chaos and comedy, I realized that truth, no matter how inconvenient, was a weapon more potent than any sword. If I was to be king, then I would wield that truth, awkward and unpolished though it might be, to carve a path through the illusions threatening to engulf us all. And so, with a heart full of uncertainty and a head full of fool's wisdom, I stepped forward into the storm, ready to lead an army of idiots against a war of illusions. The crown might be too heavy for my cap, but it was mine, now accidental, absurd, and entirely real. But as the sun set behind the castle towers, casting long shadows over the uncertain road ahead, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much stranger tale. For in a kingdom where only the jester tells the truth, the real jest is yet to come. It began, as all great military endeavors do, with a parade of calamities. The training grounds, a once pristine expanse of manicured grass and polished stones, quickly became a stage for chaos under my direction. I, the newly crowned monarch whose closest experience to leadership was juggling flaming pies and telling uncomfortable truths, had been charged with shaping this ragtag band of enchanted oddities into an army. An army that, frankly, looked more like a collection of the kingdom's best mistakes Take moth-eyed Marla, for instance. Her eyes, a gift of enchanted night vision, were a constant marvel and a constant headache. While she could spot a shadow in pitch darkness or discern the shimmer of hidden magic, she often mistook innocent illusions for lurking enemies, pointing out invisible threats with a shriek that sent the others scattering. Her wide eyes, glowing faintly even in daylight, gave her an air of permanent astonishment, as if the world was a never-ending surprise party to which she hadn't been invited. Then there was Sir Stumbleton, a knight who might have been valiant if only his own enchanted armor didn't betray him at every turn. The armor was a relic from a long-forgotten enchantment, designed to protect, but cursed to trip its wearer up. So, instead of striking heroic poses, Sir Stumbleton spent most of his time sprawled on the ground, his helmet cocked at an angle that made him look perpetually puzzled. His stature was imposing, but his coordination was not, which made his attempts at discipline both tragic and hilarious. Whispering Wren was a scout who communicated solely through riddles and half-truths, a gift that was less practical and more maddening. Her soft voice, cloaked in feathers that seemed to flutter even without wind, would issue cryptic warnings that left the rest of the recruits scratching their heads or arguing amongst themselves about the meaning of her words. It was like trying to lead a conversation with a riddle wrapped in an enigma and sprinkled with nonsense. My first attempt at drilling this motley crew was, unsurprisingly, a disaster. Commands were misheard, abilities misused, and the enchanted quirks that made each soldier unique also made uniformity a cruel joke. "Forward march," I shouted, only to see moth-eyed Marla sprint off in the opposite direction, convinced she'd spotted an invisible enemy. Sir Stumbleton tripped over his own feet, sending a shower of sparks as his armor clanged against the stones. While whispering, Wren whispered a cryptic warning about shadows dancing between soldiers that no one understood. Despite the chaos, I refused to despair. If this army was to stand against a war of illusions, perhaps their quirks were not flaws but hidden strengths. After all, if you can't trust illusions, the ability to see through them or confuse the enemy with nonsense might be the very edge we needed. This theory was put to the test sooner than expected. One foggy morning, while the recruits bumbled through a routine exercise, moth-eyed Marla suddenly stopped, her luminous eyes narrowing. "There," she whispered, pointing to a cluster of trees where the morning mist seemed thicker, shimmering unnaturally. I approached cautiously, heart pounding with a mixture of hope and skepticism. As I peered into the mist, the shapes began to shift, phantoms, mirages, illusions designed to confuse and disorient. It was the enemy's magic in action, weaving falsehoods into the very air we breathed. "This is it," I declared. "The war isn't just about swords and shields. It's a battle of perception." The recruits gathered, their earlier mishaps replaced by focused attention. Sir Stumbleton, brushing dirt from his armor after another spectacular stumble, gave a determined nod. Whispering Wren, for once, spoke plainly. Truth cuts through veils that shadows weave. A strange camaraderie blossomed from the shared understanding. We were no longer just a band of enchanted fools. We were a force uniquely equipped to face the enemy's illusions. The absurdities that had once been our weaknesses could become our greatest weapons. That evening, around a flickering campfire, I shared with them what I had learned. "We're not conventional," I admitted, "nor are we perfect. But the enemy expects armies of steel and silence. They do not expect laughter, honesty, or the kind of foolishness that makes no sense at all." The firelight danced across their faces, illuminating hope where doubt had once resided. "We fight not just with swords," I continued, "but with truth and wit. We dismantle illusions with laughter and expose lies with honesty. The night sky stretched vast and unknowable above us, but for the first time, the path ahead seemed less daunting. Our army of absurdity, stitched together by enchanted quirks and unconventional wisdom, was ready to face a war like no other. And as I looked around at the faces lit by fire and resolve, I realized that sometimes the greatest truths come wrapped in the most ridiculous of packages. So, with a heart full of hope and a head full of foolery, I prepared to lead this unlikely band into the unknown. The war of illusions awaited, and we were ready to meet it with a smile, a jest, and the unyielding power of honesty. In the whimsical realm where truth was the jester's sole province, the shadows often hid more than just murky corners. They concealed secrets, curled tight in whispers and half-truths. Jasper, now not merely the kingdom's fool, but its unlikely king, paced the narrow corridor leading to Mordecai's chamber. The air was heavy with the scent of smoldering incense and old parchment, a sensory cloak as thick as the soothsayer's web of lies. Mordecai sat hunched behind a cluttered desk, his fingers nervously tracing arcane symbols on brittle scrolls. His eyes flicked up, narrowing with suspicion and fear as Jasper's boots echoed against the stone floor. "Ah, your majesty," the soothsayer croaked, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Come to hear more of the kingdom's doom." Jasper grinned, the bells on his cap jingling faintly. "Or perhaps, to hear the truth behind your so-called visions, Mordecai." The soothsayer shifted, the room's flickering candlelight casting his face into a patchwork of light and shadow. "Prophecies are delicate instruments," he whispered, "meant to guide, not to bind, or to frighten, to control." Jasper countered, stepping closer. "Your prophecies have sown fear like a plague, twisting loyalties and turning neighbor against neighbor." Mordecai's lips pressed into a thin line. "And yet the kingdom listens. They need something to believe in, even if that belief is cloaked in foreboding." Jasper's eyes sparkled with a mix of mischief and resolve. "Then it's time they believed in something else, something honest." The confrontation was swift but charged, a dance of words and wit. Jasper's voice, usually a source of courtly amusement, now wielded the sharp edge of truth like a blade. He laid bare the inconsistencies in Mordecai's tales, the conveniently vague predictions that always foretold doom, and the subtle manipulations that kept the kingdom shackled in paranoia. Word spread quickly. The grand hall buzzed with nervous energy as Jasper summoned the court. Mordecai, pale and trembling, found himself on a makeshift stage, the spotlight of scrutiny glaring down like a relentless sun. "Here," the Jasper announced, his voice booming yet laced with satire. "The soothsayer's prophecies, a tragic comedy of errors, a manual for fear-mongering." He reenacted the most infamous predictions with exaggerated flare dragons that never came, plagues that missed their mark, wars that dissolved in smoke. Laughter rippled through the crowd, uneasy at first, then genuine. Some courtiers exchanged glances, realization dawning like a slow sunrise. Lady Mirabelle, standing nearby, whispered to Sir Percival, "Could it be that we've been puppets to a charlatan's script?" "Or perhaps," Sir Percival replied gruffly, "we've needed the script more than the truth." After the spectacle, Jasper found himself alone in the palace gardens. The moon cast silver light over dew-speckled leaves, and the night's chill crept under his skin. Lady Mirabelle joined him, her gaze thoughtful. "Some lies," she mused, "are like the mortar in a crumbling wall. Without them, everything falls apart." Jasper nodded slowly. "But walls built on lies are prisons as much as protection. I wonder if truth can build something stronger, even if it cracks and shifts." She smiled faintly, only a fool would try. Later, in the solitude of his chambers, Jasper stared at the shattered remnants of a crystal ball, the soothsayer's prized possession, now broken. The fragments glittered in the candlelight like shattered dreams. Was fate a fixed path, or a tapestry woven by belief? Did free will hold sway, or were they all actors in an absurd play written long before their cues? Jasper's heart ached with the weight of the questions, but also beat with the thrill of possibility. The truth, he realized, was not a blunt instrument, but a sharp wit. A dance of light and shadow, a puzzle with pieces yet to be placed. And as the kingdom's sole bearer of honesty, he was both fool and king, jester and seer, tasked with turning the tide of illusions with nothing but a fool's cap and a sharp tongue. As dawn crept over the horizon, Jasper donned his motley once more, the bells jingling a hopeful tune. The soothsayer's reign of fear was broken, but the war for the kingdom's soul was only beginning. And so, with a grin and a bow, Jasper stepped out to face a world eager for truth, yet still tangled in the webs of enchanted lies. The punchline was his to deliver, and the kingdom waited, breath held and hearts uncertain, for the next act in this comedy of errors. After all, Jasper mused aloud, if fate has any sense of humor, it's going to be a good one. The stage was set, the players assembled, and the jester's tale was far from finished. The dawn broke over the shimmering plains like a bad joke told at the wrong time, Mokewood, unexpected, and slightly unsettling in its timing. The jester stood at the head of his ragtag army, the motley colors of their garb swirling in the morning breeze, reflecting the chaotic spirit of the moment. Around him, the soldiers fidgeted nervously, unsure whether to trust their senses or the odd spark of hope that had begun to kindle in their hearts. Ladies, gentlemen, and those who prefer not to be categorized, the jester began, his voice ringing clear and crisp. Today we face an enemy who dresses in smoke and mirrors, quite literally. Their weapons are lies, their armor made of illusions. But we have something far more powerful, truth, and a bit of well-timed foolishness. Sergeant Blunderbuss gave a hearty laugh, his armor clanging loudly. Aye, sire. And if that fails, I have a knack for tripping over my own feet and taking half their battalion with me. The jester grinned, tapping his cap spells with a finger. Excellent strategy, Sergeant. We'll call it the Blunderbuss Ballet. As the enemy forces materialized on the horizon, the ground seemed to ripple like heat waves on a summer's day. Soldiers appeared and vanished, their forms flickering between solid and ephemeral. Arrows sang through the air only to dissolve into harmless sparks moments before impact. The jester's army hesitated, eyes wide as the battlefield itself seemed to warp around them. Remember, the jester called out, what you see is not always what is. Trust your wits, not your eyes. And if you see something that looks too good to be true, well, it probably is. The illusionist general emerged from the mist like a shadow given shape. His robes swirled in impossible patterns, colors shifting and blending as if painted by an artist with a very mischievous streak. His voice was a smooth melody, laced with mockery and menace. Ah, the fool turned king, he purred. Tell me, do you truly believe your truth can pierce the veil of deception? Or are you simply another pawn dancing to the tune of fate's cruel jest? The jester stepped forward, unflinching. I believe, he said, that even the cruelest jest is no match for a good laugh and a keen eye. With a swift gesture, Mimsy the Mirror Mage raised her enchanted mirror. The glass shimmered, catching the distorted images surrounding them and twisting them back on their creators. Enemy soldiers faltered, their own illusions tripping them up, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Sergeant Blunderbuss charged forward, tripping on a stray root and crashing into a cluster of illusionary archers. The archers' bows snapped mysteriously, arrows flying harmlessly into the sky. The soldiers of the Jester's army roared with laughter and seized the moment to press forward. Confusion, the Jester quipped, the oldest trick in the book. But when the book is upside down and the pages are missing, you have to improvise. The clash of steel and magic echoed across the plains, punctuated by the Jester's sharp observations and the army's growing confidence. Illusions shattered beneath the relentless light of truth, and for the first time, the enemy's fearsome magic seemed less like an invincible wall and more like a house of cards waiting for a well-aimed poke. As the sun climbed higher, the Jester found himself face to face with the illusionist general once more. Their duel was less about weapons and more about words. Speech, sentence, a spell, each retort a shield. You rely too much on honesty, the illusionist sneered. Sometimes, a well-placed lie is necessary to survive. Perhaps, the Jester replied, but when lies are the only currency, the fool who speaks truth can buy the kingdom. With a final flourish, the Jester's laughter rang out, clear and unyielding, breaking through the last of the enemy's enchantments. Around him, his army surged forward, hearts lightened by the knowledge that even in the darkest illusions, a spark of truth could ignite victory. And so, amid the absurdity and chaos, the war of illusions found its first crack in the armor, a crack filled with honesty, humor, and the unshakable spirit of fools who dared to see the world as it truly was. But as the dust began to settle, the Jester knew this was but the opening act. The real challenge was yet to come, and the stage was set for a spectacle where truth and deception would dance a dangerous waltz. Onward, my friends, he declared, for in this theater of war, the fool's cap is mightier than the crown. And with that, the battle raged on, laughter ringing louder than the clash of swords, and truth shining brighter than the most dazzling of illusions.